Welcome back to the Awakening Potential Show. This is a space where ordinary softens and the extraordinary is allowed to emerge. I'm your host, Karen Rudolph, and this is a show that's for, I want to say, inspired people or people who are about to get inspired by our conversations, who carry a lot, learn a lot, and quickly know that there's more and more to do, not more to do, rather more to remember. So here we talk about awakening, not as a concept, but more as a lived experience through real stories, embodied wisdom, and conversations that meet life where it actually is. So this is where sassy confidence meets classy wisdom and bold badassy brilliance gets expressed without apology. So take a breath, let your shoulders drop, and give yourself permission to be here fully. So let's begin. I am so excited about my next guest. Today, I'm honored to share the space with someone who really truly embodies the journey and reflects it from his heart and everything he does. My guest, Ray,
It's
I should have asked before. Oh God, Newman. Forgive me. I'm so sorry.
it's all good. It's a great to have the spontaneity and then spontaneous be able to correct yourself. I think it's all in the moment. It's all good.
Oh, thank you. Raamon is the co-founder of New Mavericks and Conscious Billionaire, and he is the author of The Science of Protection. And when I see you, I'm going to request a signature for sure, my copy. And thank you for that, by the way. So, welcome. Please join me in welcoming Raamon Newman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Karen. It's just hearing how you've positioned this show and what it's about. I just love how you're bringing out this, and it's so important. We were just talking before how it's easily for people and anyone to get bored. And the only real reason why that is because we're not awakening more of our potential. And we
Exactly.
don't realize how extraordinary we are within and how that extraordinary value within can create extraordinary value without inside.
Um,
So I think your podcast and your intent with this podcast is absolutely fantastic and
thank you.
proud to be a participant here.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor. And I know you're in the midst of moving and doing so much with family and such that thank you truly for taking the time to be here with us. Because your story, and I don't know all of your stories, so we're going to get to know you a lot better and share with the listening audience. But I always like to go back in time. We always have a beginning, and I don't want to just jump into where you are now and what you're doing. But going back to your beginnings, your roots, so to speak. Do you find, is there any correlation to what was going on back when you were a youth to what you're doing now?
For sure, in a different expression. I've gone from being your typical New Zealand Kiwi kid that played a lot of sport, a lot of rugby, running. I ended up excelling at running, very outwardly active and trying to pursue my potential from that outward dynamic activity point of view.
Uh-huh.
And I did okay. I was top three ranked national junior athlete in New Zealand and won cross country team titles and rugby championships for 4 consecutive years.
Wow.
And it was great. But at the end of it, in my early 20s, I was burning out. I was just so pushing that outward stroke of life, trying to fulfill my potential, only to really collapse my health. And I got very sick, and basically, about 6 months, I just had a lot of lung issues, spent a lot of nights coughing most nights, didn't sleep much, felt like I was insomniac, got depressed because I was on track to go from being a top national athlete to being an international athlete, and I had to qualify for the World Junior Championships in order to do that. And I missed by a few seconds in the 1500 meters. And so it was one of those crash and burn situations. And fortunately, I guess I was driven enough or I had enough spirit of inquiry to go, why? I've lost this purpose that I'd been basically at since I was the age of 10. And now it seemed like it just wasn't worth it. And that I wanted to recover and keep going, but it was like I'm missing something. There's something I'm not getting. Because why am I suffering trying to achieve? And I think we can all get in that trap where we're trying to achieve so much, but we're suffering and not happy and fulfilled in the process. even though it might be exhilarating, but deep down, we don't really have that inner peace. And I think we ultimately all come from that field of peace and consciousness. And then we get caught up in this thing we call the world. And then we forget it. And like you said, we have to come back and remember it at some point. Otherwise, we just live a life here on earth of constant suffering and stress and issues. And so I guess I have a little bit of extreme personality because that went from being very outward to being very inward at the age of 25. So in the space of from the age of 20 to 25, I basically went through a metamorphosis from being a very outward, athletic type personality to being a very inward monk. And I was meditating. I ended up found myself in the Blue Mountains of North Carolina, just outside Boone, North Carolina, meditating with a group of over 300 men on a campus there. And the whole focus was inner silence and transcendence. So these were
Beautiful.
men from all different countries and religions and ethnics, and all we wanted was to just be absorbed 8 hours a day in that field of consciousness and peace and coherence and enliven that, not just for ourselves, but also for collective consciousness. And
Absolutely.
that really filled me up from the inside out rather than me trying to fill myself out from the outside in, which can be a hit or miss. And
Yeah,
in some ways, it's a bit of an illusion trying to fill yourself from the outside in. You may be temporarily able to do that and get some sort of outer
absolutely.
fulfillment. But yeah, but I'm still not completely settled and fulfilled and at peace with myself.
Yeah.
And so I guess I just went from being that outward type personality to being very inward and content. And I was only going to do that for 1 year, but it was so charming and so fulfilling and so awakening that I ended up doing it for 10 years.
Oh, wow, God bless. Before we move into that, go back a little in time. I'm very curious. I have a very curious mind, needless to say. That's why
You
I
have to be as a podcaster. That's why you're
Oh,
awakening
not just a
potential to be
podcast
curious.
for life, right? This is what keeps my passion going as well. So I'm curious, was it your drive to be an athlete, or was it perhaps your father's or somebody else's, or was that something that was innate within you?
I think it was innate within me. I was very energetic as a kid. Grandmother used to say, you just never stop running around the place. And so I guess it was an expression of my personality, at least in those first 20 years of life. And then I guess it fulfilled its purpose. And I still love sport. I still love competitiveness. I love competitive, not for the sake of competitiveness, but competition is for the sake of competence. Competition is for the competent, or just to show that you're competent in yourself and that you can get more competent through that process of competition. And so I love that process and experience. And I had some really good coaches. I had an Olympic gold medal winning coach. And he said, if you keep the way you're progressing and developing and training and racing, there's no reason why you can't go to the Olympics as long as you stay healthy. Didn't get that last part right. And that sent me on my health journey and my spiritual journey, which at the end of the day is a greater boon than any Olympics.
Right. So going last question to go back there before we get there, and I have a million questions about it. But being the monk you've become, what was your greatest takeaway from the experience? I have to imagine, and I am not in your world or in your head, but I have to imagine there must have been at one moment a little bit of disappointment or letdown, for lack of better. But what
Mhm.
was the biggest takeaway from that experience? Because
From the athletic 10 years of
yeah,
pursuing.
because I like to believe, and maybe I'm totally off track here, but I like to believe in my world that everything spirals up. We learn from our experiences
Sure.
to get us to where we are now, which is often so much more exciting and fulfilling than what we thought it was back when.
Yes, definitely. The takeaway for me is that I was very good at doing the outer stuff. I wasn't good at doing the inner stuff and taking care of myself from the
Right.
inside out. Recovery, the ability for my mind to go to a state of peace and coherence, which then settles my physiology. So the reason why we do get health problems, from my experience, is that we don't come back and remember the source of ourselves, which is
Absolutely.
that field of consciousness, which has infinite intelligence and organizing power in it. When we start to disconnect from that and we're so caught up in the doing, then we lose connection to the source energy that allows us to achieve in the first place. So my lesson from that experience was that silence and consciousness is primary and the basis for great action and activity. Just like an archer, in order to really hit that target, the archer has to pull the arrow back and has to use their awareness to aim that as accurately as possible at that target. But if that arrow is not pulled back and aimed correctly, there's no way that arrow is going to get anywhere near that target. And
Right.
so I was all about just throwing the arrow, not really pulling the arrow back. And so now that's my whole life, is to pull the arrow back and help others pull their arrows back so that they are coming from that most coherent infinite intelligence within inside themselves that governs themselves and the wider environment and universe. And so that action is really in tune with the laws of nature and that we don't violate those laws of nature that allow our physiology to be coherent and healthy and even our relationships and business.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. And this is why I think I really enjoyed our conversation when we first met. So, again, I'm grateful for that because I love conscious conversations and it takes something to awaken. For the listening audience who are possibly struggling with how to do that, obviously you made the choice to go and meditate for a year and loved it
Mhm.
so much. 10 years later, you're still there.
Still
And
do.
I have to imagine that someone in the listening audience is waiting to hear how you did that. And more importantly, going from this vibrant, energetic person to being still and quiet. And there's so much chatter and so much noise and so much stuff going on in the world. How does one get to that point of,
Yeah, great. You said the first part, you have to make a decision and choice. That's what you want to experience more of.
yeah,
And then you have to understand what that means and then how to get there. And how to get there is you need someone who's obviously been there. And there's a few enlightened people that have been on this planet that have taught knowledge and techniques of how the mind is structured in layers. We have the gross mind, the
uh,
surface level of mind, the conscious mind. And then below that, we have the subconscious mind. And the analogy I like here is the iceberg. So the iceberg, in order to float above the water, one quarter of it, it has to have three quarters of it under the water to be able to hold that one quarter above the water. So that's like the mind. We have the conscious mind above the water. We have the subconscious mind below the water. But it doesn't stop there because that iceberg would not exist in the first place without the ocean. That iceberg is just an expression of the ocean. And so the ability for the mind to go from the conscious to the subconscious back to its source and consciousness is where the greatest charm is. The mind actually naturally wants to be settled. It does not like being agitated and unsettled. Who likes that? Nobody. It's uncomfortable, it's awkward. It makes us want to do things that ultimately cause us harm, be it hard drugs or whatever, and substances. And it's only because we don't know that the mind actually wants to go to that field of greatest charm. And it's not through our senses. We can experience certain pleasures and joys through the senses, but they're temporal. The mind actually wants to go back to its source and be settled in consciousness. And so techniques and meditation that allows the mind to transcend, to settle down to finer and finer and quieter levels of experience of its own nature, its true nature, then that is a charm in itself. And what you realize within that is there is a huge amount of energy and coherence and intelligence and creativity. And that's why I was so charmed by the experience because we can look, yes, there's a lot of diversity out there. There's a lot of things to entertain us on the level of senses, but the best entertainment is within your own inner entertainment, within your own consciousness. And
yes.
so we had certain techniques to be out with. The technique that I was initiated into was transcendental meditation. So TM is a transcending technique. It's not a mindfulness technique. It's not a focused attention or concentration technique, which keeps the mind more on the surface levels. It's a transcending technique. Allows the mind to fully let go and settle down to its deepest, most subtlest nature. And so that was the first part of it. The second part of it would be able to act and function from there because within that silence within us, there's a huge amount of dynamism, huge amount of potential. And when we were given techniques to how to then function from that field of silence, then we were able to create influences and effects on ourselves and the collective consciousness that were uplifting, that were evolutionary, greater coherence. And there was even one technique that was a levitation technique. It was with the ability for the mind to go to its source, where mind and body are one, have it introduce a thought there, and the body wants to activate that thought. So it was a process where the body would lift up, it would be like a hop, it would it's like a kundalini going up and energy flowing up, and the body wants to go up. And there's a huge amount of energy and brain coherence that gets activated through this technique. And to me, it was like running without running. It was like moving without having to physically move because it was all coming from an experience that was generating energy as action at its greatest potential. Action from the field of consciousness is a field of all possibilities. And when you entertain that possibility on that level, then things like the body lifting up can happen. And it's not that I perfected that because there's so much stress in our collective consciousness that that experience is not quite available for people to stabilize it. There has been great saints and monks and of the past that have had levitation experiences. And I think there was a saint out of India in the late eight. She was born in the late 1800s. She died in like 1962. But there was someone who witnessed her sitting, hovering for 10 minutes
I
because
heard.
she had that purity of nervous system and mind-body coordination that she would just have a thought. And it's not so much that you're trying to do it, but you're in that ecstasy of that potential, that it is possible, that your mind is on that field of all possibilities, and then this possibility is entertained, and then it happens. So I'm still in the process of stabilizing the ability to have that mastery. It's called mastery of the air, basically, because we are made up of the five elements, and space is one of them. So the ability for the human mind to activate and enliven space creates a lightness in ourselves, in our mind, in our physiology, which makes us feel an incredible amount of bliss and a great potential of possibility to create
Uh,
anything or experience anything.
so how long did it take you to really settle yourself into that, coming from your real life over here,
Yeah.
traveling over here to the States to do that? How
Yeah.
long?
So the first one was learning to meditate when I was 18 going 19 when I was burning out as an athlete. My running coach's son was a teacher of trance and meditation. I said, I need something. Let me hear about this. And then I listened to it, but didn't listen to it because I just wanted the experience. Had the experience, and my contrast in that first time I transcended, my mind really transcended. I thought I was a really super kind of chill, relaxed cool athlete. But when I experienced that deeper level of relaxation, I went, oh, this is what real relaxation is. And the contrast was so great between where I thought I was relaxed and where actual that deepest level of stillness is that I literally walked out of that first meditation feeling like I was floating on the clouds. I was like, because not because I was, but because the contrast. And so that was the first step. And then I just wanted more of that experience. So then I just kept going to regular group meditations. And then I decided I wanted to go to university where part of the curriculum is a university in Iowa called MIU, Mercy International University. And I wanted to experience the advanced techniques and learn there. And there was a whole group. There's two domes there, geodesic domes, one for men, one for women, and the students and the faculty and all that. And so they part of their whole the whole education system there is that knowledge, destruction, and consciousness. So as you awaken the potential of the subject, yourself, the student, then you can process information and knowledge and the objective knowledge of things that much more better and clearer from a greater level of awareness. So I wanted to be in that environment to really foster that and understand that and experience that. And then there was a preparatory program. It was like boot camp before going to being a full-time monk. So there was a group on the campus and men, or there was a woman's group that they just wanted to focus on their spiritual program and their meditation program and obviously do school or whatever. I was working at a marketing press on the university. And so I did that for a couple of years. So that warmed me up. And then I go, now I want to do it full time. Now I want to do it 8 hours. I'm doing it maybe 4 hours a day. And then I go, I want to make the step to just do this full time. And so then that's when I went to North Carolina and joined the group there, where a whole system was set up there to be in that full time meditation program. So it was a phased transition. It wasn't like I went from being this very outward athlete, training every day, to being completely in it. It was about from the age of 20 to the age of 25.
Is one there, it has to, when you're immersing yourself in a program like that, there's got to be a way of financially supporting yourself, I would assert. Were you doing something on the outside to fund this, or is it, I think of monks.
Yeah, practical question. How do you make this work? How do you make this lifestyle work? And I was like, I wasn't really sure. And a friend of mine just said, well, it was a kind of like I've been working on a project associated with the university. And I got to meet some quite wealthy people and in that process. And then I told them I had this desire to just go and do 1 year and meditate full time. And there is a monthly overhead. It was about $1,000 back then. And this is 1998. And so they said, because the project wasn't progressing as it was planned. So I said, well, I want to do this. And they said, well, we'll support you for a year. And so I had about $1,000 donation sponsorship to cover my overhead, room and board and food and stuff to live that lifestyle. And then the interesting thing is, and this really ties in to what I'm doing today. At the end of that year, I was either like, I'm going to leave or I'd love to stay, but I don't know how because my sponsor said they just do a year. And so a buddy of mine from Australia, my business partner now, going 25 years, he said to me, hey, look, I had the same issue, but you know what I did is I created a service out of meditating. And I said, oh, what's that? He said, well, I'm a silent partner to business leaders. I meditate 8 hours a day. Every couple of weeks, I get on the phone with them and I talk with them. I give them knowledge. I support them with their mind and help them see the deeper truth and really enable them to make the best decisions from a high level of consciousness. And he said, I'm happy for you to do that with me and some people in the US that he didn't. And we can just start the process of doing that with them. And literally, we became a pair of monks that were silent partners to business leaders, CEOs running multi-million and today multi-billion dollar companies. And we're that silent value for them to remind them that consciousness is primary and that they are consciousness. And that's the basis of their leadership. And so we've been doing this now going 18 years and it just grew out of that. So he eventually, actually a year or so after that, he went to the Himalayas for 6 years and he was up there and I was just stayed in North Carolina. And then I also had went and formed a group in New Zealand, an island off the coast of New Zealand, and then in India and then in Holland. And eventually I decided 10 years was enough. I'd fulfilled that inner journey and wanted to integrate back into the world. And so what better place to go and do that than New York City and an acting program there?
Love it. How was the transition into, as you could, quote unquote, the real world? How was that for you after 10
Oh,
years? That had, and in New York, no less.
yeah, that was another extreme transformation. I guess it's part of my personality. I don't recommend it for everybody, but if you have that inclined nature, just go with it, roll with it. I was a little bit of fish out of water for sure. Because when you think about it, like the last 10 years of those late 20s, early 30s, which most people are having a great time. They're exploring the world, they're having fun. I was just meditating. And so I came out, it was really funny. I came out and so someone said to me, oh, Britney Spears got a new song out. I go, who's Britney Spears? I had no idea who was who. Really weird. I'd missed that whole 90s culture basically and that early 2000 culture. I'd lost all the movies. I didn't know, blank in my awareness. So it was a reintegration big time. I was vibrating on this silent monk level and everyone was up here, New York City, just like most dynamic market
Yeah.
in the world. And what was worse in some ways was that it was 2000, 2008 when there's the financial crisis was going on. So it was around all these people very stressed out in New York City, wondering about whether they had their job and whether their business would survive and people's investments crashing and everything. But that also made me realize, oh man, how come these super intelligent business leaders have created a financial calamity for themselves and their companies and the economy? And I realized they had the same problem I did as an athlete. They're so focused on that outer achievement and not their inner development at the same time, not awakening that potential. They were just operating on the potential that they had from 10 years ago or 20 years ago on, and they hadn't really developed that inner potential. So then certain influences creep into one's, as you take on more responsibility, you have to grow that potential. Otherwise, you'll start making decisions that will literally collapse that achievement. So achievement becomes a zero-sum game. And it's almost like those that are able to build on achievement and protect achievement because they are developing their potential. But if you
Right.
haven't built that foundation inside yourself, you'll start making decisions at great levels of responsibility that'll basically just collapse your achievement and progress.
Yeah.
So that's what the financial crisis at that time was really all about.
Right. So what I'm hearing though is through that whole process of collapse especially with our economy, and I remember that one well, you were able to see through it what others were not seeing at the as not awakening potential at the time. And
Exactly.
what did you do with that information? Did you still go
Uh,
into acting or did you?
I did acting just to help me reintegrate into the world because I've been so used to non-acting in silence. And
Right.
so acting was great to help me integrate the silence I'd gained from being in the monastic cave environment into the world because acting is all about great connecting. And so that really helped that process. And it served its purpose, not because I wanted to be acting, although I really love, I really got the actor's buzz, as they say. And so I was there for a few semesters and just acting training and doing performing and stuff like that. And I ended up found myself back in Iowa and in a company doing a couple of musicals in a place called way off Broadway. It was way off Broadway in
Yeah,
Iowa.
for sure.
And so that really brought me back to the surface with my consciousness. I still had to grow into the worldly me again. I felt like I had to go back to the 25-year-old worldly me and pick up where I left off in order to integrate from the world in the worldly intelligent point of view, even though I had all this in spiritual intelligence. So then realizing that business leaders spend so much time on their outer development and achievement and not much time on their inner development,
Absolutely.
and that collapse was basically to show me is that, hey, they haven't got it all together, even though they're very smart, intelligent people. But that can be a danger in itself because intelligence, IQ, and EQ, and even AI without consciousness will not be fulfilling and will create some problems and suffering if it's not there with consciousness and silence.
Right.
So that's our job. My business partner and I, our purpose is to bring leaders back to that and to, like you said, remember that as their basis and not relying on their IQ and their EQ, which can be very egoic and can be smart and intelligent, but you can know things, but if you don't really understand it from a point of view of consciousness, the wholeness, then you may make a decision that you think is right, but then it turns out it's not.
Exactly. It's so cool that you actually here you are silent, quiet, introspective, and then you go out into the world as an actor. And I remember for myself, I did a lot of creative problem solving. I was traveling globally doing that. And I had a big gig in South Africa, and I was very introverted at the time.
Mhm.
And I remember taking an improv class. Boy,
Yeah.
did that knock me. That was like a stretch for me, but it was the best thing I could have done to get out of my head and
Yep.
into also play and reminding
Yes.
myself that play is super important. So,
Yes. I recommend everyone learns to transcend and everyone does some sort of artistic expression, acting, improv, whatever. And those two combined, it really helps you integrate with your outer self.
absolutely.
Both are very powerful awakening potential processes that I highly recommend. And the acting for me is also the ability to live from a Meisner point of view, which is what the acting training I went through, the ability to live spontaneously, truthfully in any circumstance. And in acting, it's an imaginary circumstance, but you want that in life. You want to be able to live from your spontaneous truth in every moment as much as possible because
Absolutely.
that what makes us triumphant and that's what gives us protection.
So, what would you say your superpower is? What's the gift?
I think it's protection. The name Raamon, it's the first name my mother thought of. There's this whole story how I ended up making it my first name. It was my middle name and then I made it my first name. But the name Raamon actually means wise counsel and protection. And so I go, okay, well, that's my name. Well, I better live up to it. And so that's why we wrote the book, The Science of Protection, because many people are familiar with the science of achievement. Robbins has done a great job with that, and everyone has their own science of achievement, be it his focus, massive action, and grace. And we go, that's definitely how achievement happens. But then why do people fall? Why do people achieve and then not achieve, or achieve and then corrupt their health or some aspect of their other parts of their life? And so we realized that there has to be protection as the basis for achievement and progress, so that you build on whatever you achieve in progress. You don't lose it. And I found I lost my achievement and progress as an athlete because I didn't have the inner protection to be able to protect my health.
Mm.
And having that strong immunity enables you to accomplish and achieve as much as you want, as long as you want. But if you haven't protected that immune value of yourself, that protection value of yourself, then you're going to achieve, and then the stress is going to get into you and corrupt your immunity and start to cause whatever disease is your weakness, sort of thing.
Absolutely. There's one question I always ask everybody, and I call it pearl of wisdom. For me, they're like little pearls that create that beautiful necklace and the oyster, as it were. And I love asking this because it cuts through titles and roles. And what do you know is your true, as I said, your super, not just your superpower in the world, but taking that, and what is that pearl you want to leave the listening audience with?
I'll get to the overall answer, but to start from a point value, we can have a lot of obstacles or enemies in life, but those aren't really where the real enemies and obstacles exist. The external enemies or conflict or obstacles that we experience outside often come from internal enemies. Those internal enemies can be this, from what we learned is from my monk days, is there's a hexagon of inner enemies we all have to deal with. One is
Right.
greed, and that can be greed. It doesn't have to be greed of money. It could be greed of food. It could be greed of love. It could be, meaning the superficial kind, or greed of pleasure. And then we have things like anger, which is basically a fire or a frustration that we have either with ourselves or with someone else. Or then we can have jealousy, which is we're in a state of comparison. We can have things like lust and vanity, where we're just really craving things that are superficial. And then we can have false attachments, that we're attached to things that are not really permanent. But we're clinging to them. It could be clinging to something in the past, even.
Yeah.
And we had that with a client yesterday. And the more that we can realize that we're not those enemies, but
Right.
we are consciousness, and that our true nature is bliss consciousness, then we're not so afflicted, or we're free from being sabotaged by those internal enemies, which can create the external enemies, right?
Absolutely.
And the beautiful thing about just waking up and saying, consciousness is primary, I am consciousness, just gives a lot of relief to the mind to realize that you're an unbounded field of intelligence and possibilities, and that you don't have to be bound by these small things like greed and anger and lust and vanity and jealousy and false attachments. And by being able to purify that and realize your true nature, then you're free to live and free to create without creating enemies for yourself or having to experience enemies that you don't really want to experience.
Absolutely. I love that. What I hear is that, and it's such an important reminder, that wisdom doesn't always come from having to figure it all out. Rather, it's coming from the willingness to listen when
Yeah.
life is speaking. And it's
Yeah. I like
speaking.
that. Like that. Love that.
So
And the key to listening is having a settled mind, because you can't really listen when your mind's so full of clutter, either from external or from your own mind just racing and not being settled.
this has just been, I could talk to you all day. That's how I felt when I met you, and I knew there was more than just the moments that we had. So I am so grateful that you have taken the time to be with us today. And I thank you so much for your honesty, your heart, and your willingness to be on the journey with us. Thank you.
Now, it's been beautiful. I really appreciate the opportunity here to have the deeper awakening potential conversation, because there's not enough of it in the world. And the more that we do have these conversations, the more we can just be at peace with ourselves and with others, and realize we have to fight for everything.
Exactly. I like take that breath, take a moment, pause, and take a breath. Even that little breath will support. And for
Yeah.
our listening audience, again, All of Ramon's contact information will be in the summary notes. So feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions. All his contact information will be there. His book will be there. And I really invite you to connect. And I can't speak for you yourself, but is there, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that? And again, it'll be in your show notes, but
It'll be newmavericks.com. I'm in the process of upgrading the website. But it'll be up by the time you release this. So newmavericks.com, find us there. And also on the school.com, search Consciousness Billionaire. We've got a group there. We have a 30-day program where if you really want to get into that fourth state of consciousness as the basis for your thinking and decision making, we have a meditation program there, 30 days, Monday through Friday. And basically we want as many good leaders in this world that come together at certain times. It'll be 3, 5, and no, 2, 5, and 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll just have a group transcending together to enliven that value of consciousness as the basis to support everything else we want to see happen
oh,
in
what's the name
business
of
or
that?
life.
Oh, sorry.
Consciousness Billionaire. Just go to school.com,
Oh,
skool.com, and
okay.
then just search Consciousness Billionaire and you'll find the group there.
Might have to check it out myself.
Yeah, I'd love to have you. And one other thing, you just like you mentioned breath. And breathing is really powerful. And if we are in moments where we're out in activity and we're dealing with something and it's tough, going to the breath just quickly is really powerful. One way to do it is just breathe in your nose. And then once you've breathed in fully, breathe in more. So you breathe in and then slowly let that breath come out again. And that's the
Absolutely.
release, right? Out your nose or out your mouth, whatever's comfortable for
Yeah.
you. Nose is really powerful because you access deeper levels of your lungs, which is great for bringing in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide and then gives more oxygen to the brain and things like
Yeah.
that. But just that simple technique, if you find yourself in traffic or something like that, just breathe in and then breathe in again and then just slowly let it out. You'll find that you go back in from a fight flight sympathetic state to a parasympathetic, more relaxed state, and you can think clearer.
Absolutely. I love
So that's
that.
like an on the fly meditation. You need it.
I totally speak from that space all the time. But yes,
Beautiful.
thank you again and again. I'm just so excited. But thank for the listening audience. Awakening potential doesn't happen all at once. It begins the moment you become aware. And it begins to continue with that brave, bold SE choice we make along the way. So, for everyone listening, remember the bridge from ordinary to extraordinary is built with small steps of change and big leaps of faith. You are more than you keep showing up, keep rising, and awakening your potential because you're worth it. So, if today's conversation, there was something inside it for you, trust it and reach out, either one of us. And if you're speaking with me, write the word awaken so I know where you heard this and I will be the one to actually respond to you, not anybody else. So, anyway, till next time, make it a great day and thanks for being with us.